We have been evolving for 3.7 billion years, since life began on Earth. For most of that time, our ancestors are unrecognizable to us. Single cells, fish that scooch along, early mammals. They're all beautiful in their own way, they're all a completely necessary step in the evolution of us, but they're not human. Eventually though, after a huge span of time, we start to see ourselves in the fossils. About 6 million years ago, our ancestors, hominins, split from our last common ancestor with chimpanzees. 3 to 4 million years ago, we find the fossils of upright walking hominins like Lucy across eastern and southern Africa. And by 1 million years ago, we can certainly see the humanity in our ancestors. In many ways, it was still a different world, but I do believe we can truly see ourselves in these distant ancestors of ours. We can empathize with them, understand their decisions, their needs, their lifestyles. So, looking at 9 sites from across the world, let's see what humanity was up to roughly 1 million years ago. Give or take a few 100,000 years. This video is sponsored by Kiwico. Why do humans do any of the things we're going to discuss today? It's curiosity. Curiosity drives us. Curiosity just comes naturally to us. And I really want to cultivate and encourage that sense of curiosity in my kids, which is why I absolutely love Kiwico. My kids love it too. It's the best. It's really the best. Kiwico make these absolutely fantastic activities that will really engage your kid. You can literally see the cogs turning in their brain. It's so fun to see them get creative, use their imagination, play together, which is hard, as any parent will tell you. There are so many gizmos and gadgets and electronic things that can steal kids' attention, steal adults' attention, let's be honest. But I really want to keep my kids away from that as much as possible. I want them to use their imagination. Each box comes with everything you need. They're super well made, lots of wood and metal. You can go to kiwico.com to get one of their fantastic crates, or you can sign up for a subscription like I have. My kids are young, so we get this koala crate, and I even get an optional extra of a book too. So we play in the day, get a new thing to play in the day, and then a new book to read at night. It's great. And I pay for that with my own money. They didn't send me that because I'm doing the advert. I think I wouldn't be allowed to say that if it wasn't true because of advertising disclosure. Yeah, I just love it. If your kids aren't as young as mine, they've got stuff for all ages to keep them entertained, engaged, curious. If you go to kiwico.com/Stefan, you'll get 50% off your first month if you want to do those monthly crates. And you won't regret it. You won't regret it. Your kids will love it. Let's get back to this video and see what people were up to 1 million years. Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania really is one of the most special archaeological sites in the entire world. So many fossils and tools have been found here. Roughly 1.3 million years ago, it was home to this robust Australopithecus, also known as Paranthropus boisei. Australopithecines of various forms had roamed Africa since about 4 million years ago. They were extremely successful. They probably produced the earliest stone tools. They may have even left Africa, judging from stone tools found in Jordan. They were fantastic, an incredibly important step in our evolution. By 1 million years ago, though, it seems that the time of Australopiths and Paranthropus was drawing to a close. These teeth, this leg, perhaps belong to the last Paranthropus we have ever found. The extinction of a species can be a long, drawn-out, complex process. And, of course, animals evolve. Some populations of Australopithecines slowly evolved into later hominins, like Homo habilis. Some of them were certainly our direct ancestors, but not this one. We don't have any evidence that Paranthropus was our direct ancestor. Para means near or beside, and anthropus means man. They were beside man. As you can see, Paranthropus had huge jaws, and the males had massive sagittal crests along the top of their skull to hold these chewing muscles. Kind of similar to a gorilla, except we're confident Paranthropus walked upright. They were definitely hominins. There is evidence to suggest that their diet included a lot of grasses and similar plants. Whether the grass themselves, or the seeds, or the tubers, we can't say, but apparently they love nothing more than munching on grasses. However, they may have also supplemented their diet with meat. There is some interesting evidence that they may have been amongst the earliest stone tool makers. Early Oldowan style stone tools have been found alongside their big, robust teeth at Nyanga in Kenya and Swartkrans in South Africa. It's tricky to say how much meat they consumed, but it does seem their love of grasses contributed to their demise. Around 1 million years ago in East Africa, grass lands were contracting, forests were growing, which no doubt led to increased competition amongst animals that eat grass. This could have been a major factor in their demise. The end of Paranthropus, though, might have been hastened by the evolution of large-brained hominins too, like Homo erectus. One of the most famous examples being Turkana Boy, who roamed Africa roughly 1.5 million years ago. The interaction between Australopithecines and early Homo is basically unknown. Did they compete over the same resources? Did they basically ignore each other? It's really impossible to say with the evidence we have. At Drimmelen Cave in South Africa, there's good evidence for Australopithecus, Paranthropus, and Homo erectus occupying the site at very roughly the same time. As I said, some populations of Australopiths, of course, had slowly evolved into later Homo, but Paranthropus, it seems, did not. And by 1 million years ago, the sun was setting on the last of the Australopithecines, Paranthropus, and they disappear from the archaeological record. One advantage bigger-brained hominins might have had over Paranthropus was their ability to hunt big game. We're still at Olduvai Gorge, but this time looking at the site of Juma's Korongo II, which dates to between 1.1 and 0.8 million years ago. This is an incredibly rich site, with 24,962 bones recovered by anthropologists. A huge dataset which gives us an equally huge opportunity to assess life so long ago. These were big animals too, like hippos. Big animals. Some animal bones have cut marks on them. Some animal bones were clearly nibbled by carnivores, and some were butchered and nibbled. But who got to the animals first? Were our ancestors mainly scavengers or hunters? In cases where bones had been chewed and butchered, the cut marks are on the shafts of the long bones, but the teeth marks of carnivores are restricted to the ends of the bones. So, it seems from this site that we got the nutritious bit, other animals got the worst bit. Other animals were scavenging. Ancient humans were seemingly a major factor in the accumulation of the bones found here. All of this suggests that it was humans, hominins, probably a Homo erectus-like population, that were hunting these animals, hunting large animals like hippos. That really says so much about their ability to cooperate and hunt as a team. Hunting a hippo is no easy feat, no easy task. Access to all this meat, access to more nutrition, likely played a big role in our growing brains. And as our brains expanded, so did our ability to shape the world around us. 1 million years ago, hominins were producing a variety of tools, but the defining tool of the period are called Acheulean hand axes. These tools are worked on both sides and probably had a variety of purposes. One of the best places to see the development of these tools is Konso in modern Ethiopia. Here, the exceptional preservation of key layers allows us to see the evolution of this technology. At 1.75 million years ago, we can see hominins making simple tools, but they're still worked on both sides. They are clearly aiming to make a symmetrical tool. By 1.6 million years ago, the shape starts to get more refined. By 1.25 million years ago, the classic Acheulean shape is emerging, and by 850,000 years ago, they're even smaller and more refined. It's really incredible to see the slow but steady evolution of human capabilities through time. Creating these tools required the removal of perhaps 50, 60, even more flakes. This really shows that humans at this time were very capable of visualizing their goal, planning for the future form this tool would take. It makes you wonder what other areas of their lives could they imagine into the future, could they project into the future. How far did they plan ahead when it came to gathering and hunting food? Or preparing for a change of season and moving through the landscape? How far ahead did they plan for these events? Another really interesting point to consider when discussing Acheulean hand axes is the fact that you probably could not just pick up a rock and create such slim and uniformly shaped tools on your first attempt. So how was the ability to create hand axes passed on to younger members from generation to generation? Was there some degree of teaching involved? Was there even some element of rudimentary language involved? It's so difficult to speak about the earliest development of language with any certainty because words just don't get preserved in the archaeological record. All we have are these subtle clues from archaeology, a gradual increase in sophistication of our tools. It's certainly possible that there was some rudimentary language involved in the making of these objects. Hand axes probably had a variety of functions, but some excavated at Peninge in Tanzania might give us a good clue to one of their main roles. Here, hand axes and the soils around them were analysed for phytoliths, small pieces of plant matter. The phytoliths found in the soil were associated with grasses. No big surprise. The phytoliths found on the edges of the tool, though, are a much better match for wood, particularly acacia. So, the researchers hypothesize that this is evidence of these tools being used for woodworking. The fact that wood decomposes is without a doubt the biggest gap in the archaeological record, when we're talking deep in time, deep into human evolution. The oldest wooden artifacts found so far date to about 400,000 years ago, the famous Schöningen spears. They were found amongst the remains of a herd of butchered horses, the leftovers of an ambush by early Neanderthals. Although this is 600,000 years younger than our time frame, there's good evidence to believe humans 1 million years ago were capable of similar feats. They had to use something to hunt hippos. That's not an easy job. When you consider the fact that humans were certainly working stone in complex ways, they must have been working wood in similar ways too, using it to dig for tubers, as I said, get grubs out of trees. It's just a big bias in the archaeological record that stone tools survive and the bones of animals survive. But ancient humans were no doubt using wood for all sorts of purposes. This hand axe from Peninge may be the earliest evidence we have of our ancestors practicing a spot of carpentry. With these technologies, hunting abilities, cooperation, and just general increase in brain size came a much wider global presence. Our ancestors may have left Africa as early as 2 million years ago, but definitely by 1.8 million years ago, judging from the remains at Dmanisi in Georgia. By 1 million years ago, they had been living across Asia for hundreds of thousands of years. Such a large geographical spread created a lot of variation in hominin populations, and there's a big debate as to whether all of these hominins across Africa and Eurasia should be considered one species or not. 1 million years ago, modern Yunnan in central China was home to this Homo erectus. For Homo erectus to have traveled from Africa all the way to China shows just how adaptable our ancient ancestors were at this time. Of course, it did not happen in one generation, but still, so many rivers had to have been crossed, mountain valleys traversed, different prey to adapt to, storms to weather. There's truly no better evidence of the adaptability of early hominins. Although they may be different to us in a lot of ways, they were definitely very intelligent, great problem solvers. Whilst over in China, they may have reunited with a very, very distant ape relative of ours. This is a tooth of Gigantopithecus, a rather mysterious ape. We don't have a lot of remains from them. You can probably tell by the name Gigantopithecus that this ape was a big chap. Although we've only found the teeth and jaws of this animal, their size alone leads researchers to believe the ape could have perhaps been over 3 meters tall, absolute units, bigger than a modern gorilla. Genetics has revealed them to be a distant relative of orangutans. And I can't help but wonder what our very distant ancestors Homo erectus thought of them. Did they lie awake at night, terrified as the forest echoed to the grunts and snapping branches of Gigantopithecus? Did they hunt them, perhaps? We have no direct evidence of that, but Homo erectus was certainly capable of hunting large, dangerous animals. Or was Gigantopithecus like their cousins, the orangutan? Keeping a low profile, kind of shy, likes to hide away from these strange, upright walking apes. Until we find more remains, we cannot say for sure. All we can say is that hominins and Gigantopithecus were in the same region at some time, and the rest is up to our imagination. One hominin that might have wanted to steer clear of big old Gigantopithecus is tiny Homo floresiensis. This small hominin lived on the island of Flores, way down at the bottom of island Southeast Asia. Although the famous Homo floresiensis specimen, LB1, dates to around 74,000 years ago, stone tools found on the island suggest hominins have been living here for 1 million years. Was Homo floresiensis a descendant of Homo erectus that gradually became smaller and smaller through a process called island dwarfism? Or were they the descendants of an even earlier migration out of Africa by early Homo like Homo habilis? It's still highly debated. We truly do not know where they fit on our evolutionary tree. But it does seem that they arrived in this region about 1 million years ago. As far back as the 1940s even, stone tools were found on the island of Sulawesi. At the minute, we just can't say much about the creators of these tools. But the fact that they're even here is incredible. Sulawesi, Flores. These islands were almost certainly not attached to the Southeast Asian mainland. All of them sit on the other side of the Wallace Line, which is our name for a series of very deep water channels. These have been a hard barrier for many plants and animals. On the one side, you have plants and animals native to Asia, and on the other side, the plants and animals native to the Australian realm, like marsupials. So the fact that these ancient hominins are found across the region by around 1 million years ago is great evidence for some kind of deliberate water crossing. They crossed a barrier few other animals can. I'm not saying they built boats or rafts, but were they smart enough to notice wood floats? Were they smart enough to cling onto logs and make their way to new territory? Or were they just swept out to sea in a storm and lucky enough to grab hold of a log? Again, impossible to say with the evidence we have. But I can't help but think, if it was possible here, did any reach Sahul, the ancient landmass that connected modern Papua and Australia? Interesting to think about, but as yet, we have no direct evidence. So, that's just speculation for another day. One million years ago, it wasn't just tropical climates that humans called home. They had made it as far as the eastern shore of Britain. Although at that time Britain was not an island, so no sea crossing required. Here in Haysborough, yes, that is how it's pronounced, I know, I'm sorry. On behalf of England, I am sorry. Here though, the eroding coast exposed a series of footprints dating to between 1 million and 700,000 years ago. We can tell so much from these footprints. Based on the sizes of the feet and the length of their strides, their height is estimated to be between 93 centimeters and 173 centimeters, suggesting a mixed age group. Now, the site is on the coast, but when these humans lived here, it was the muddy banks of a river. They were headed south, perhaps on the hunt for mammoths or elk or horses that lived along the riverbanks. 1 million years ago, the climate of Britain was colder than today. Then southern Britain's climate would be more like Scandinavia, southern Scandinavia. Pretty chilly, pretty chilly. Does this mean that humans had already developed some form of rudimentary clothing? We know they're not sewing as such, because sewing needles don't appear in the archaeological record until around 45,000 years ago. But could they have draped furs and skins of dead animals over themselves to keep the cold north wind off their skin? I find it hard to believe that they wouldn't. During the cold nights, they also probably made whatever shelters they lived in more comfortable by piling up bedding, piling up grasses, skins again. Although we don't have direct evidence for this, It's hard to imagine living in a climate like that without some form of clothing and bedding. The urge to create some form of bed is extremely ancient. It predates humans. Gorillas make nests out of leaves and branches. Chimpanzees like to make beds or nests as well. So many animals do that. It's hard to imagine that our ancestors would lack that sense for some reason, especially in the cold. I like to imagine them huddled together under their furs, keeping each other warm, bonding. Humans, even very ancient ones, are social beings. At some point, they probably had caring family moments. One technology that may have helped our ancestors survive in cooler climates was fire. Finding the origins of fire has been a tricky task for archaeology. By around 400,000 years ago, the evidence for fire use can be found at many sites around the world. However, even at this later date, the record is still patchy. There are archaeological sites with tons and tons of evidence of human activity, but no evidence of fire at all, suggesting that some human groups, even by this late stage, were not habitually using fire. The development of a new technology can be a long drawn-out process though, especially something as complicated as fire, which requires an understanding of heat and air and fuel. It's basically our first attempt at chemistry, in a way. But are there places where the preservation conditions are just right, where we can see the subtle traces of the development of this technology? Well, at Wonderwork Cave in South Africa, we might just have it. Stratum 10 of the cave dates to around 1 million years ago. In this layer, quite far from the entrance of this cave, a full 30 meters inside the cave, archaeologists found tiny pieces of burnt grass alongside tiny fragments of bone, some of which were seemingly heated to 500 degrees C. And there are stone tools too. Humans were definitely living there at that time. This is one of the earliest and most promising leads in the search for human fire use. But there are so many unanswered questions still. Were humans at this time capable of igniting fire themselves? Or are they taking advantage of natural fires and bringing them inside the cave, trying to keep them going as long as possible? It's basically impossible to say for sure. One thing that's important to say about humanity 1 million years ago is that despite the evidence for technological innovation, at this moment in time, we have no evidence for art, or anything even approaching art. It is possible that the hominins that lived at this time, the humans that lived at this time, had beliefs and practices and symbolism that have left absolutely no archaeological trace. None whatsoever. That is entirely possible. But whatever it is within us that leads us to create big works of art, big, obvious displays of symbolism, had not evolved by 1 million years ago. The earliest trace of anything even approaching a doodle is about 500,000 years old, and consists of just a few lines scratched on a shell from Java. We don't have obvious evidence of symbolic thinking until maybe 170,000 years ago from Bruniquel Cave in France, where stalagmites were arranged in a circle by Neanderthals, or 100,000 years ago in southern Africa, where we see the first signs of painting. And 1 million years ago, we seemingly were not doing anything like this at all. And that is perhaps one of the biggest differences between you and I and a human that lived 1 million years ago. Life for infants and young at this time was probably very, very risky. And there's no better example of the risks they faced than at Atapuerca in northern Spain. The site of Grandolina, the Great Sinkhole, dates to at least 800,000 years ago, maybe up to 1 million years ago. Now, it is one of the most important archaeological sites in Europe, but back then, it was seemingly home to a group of hominins. All 6 layers are full of the remains of butchered animals, particularly deer. But the second most butchered animal on site was humans. Human remains were recovered from all 6 layers at the site, resulting in a minimum of 11 individuals. 6 children younger than 9, 3 between 10 and 15, and 2 young adults. From all 6 layers, the humans seem to have been butchered. One problem when discussing cannibalism in prehistory is that there are many situations that could result in the exact same archaeological evidence. Cannibalism could have been caused by starvation, just pure hunger. Could have been caused by warfare. Or these people could have been truly cared for and loved, and this is the subtle trace of some form of mortuary ritual. After 800,000 years in the ground, it's impossible for us to say for certain what happened. The human remains don't show any signs of different treatment compared to the animal remains, so perhaps they were not part of a mortuary ritual. But again, we have to keep in mind that these hominins may have had beliefs and practices which haven't left an archaeological trace. In fact, I am 100% certain they had beliefs and practices that haven't left an archaeological trace. However, the demographic of all of these people, their young age of all of these hominins, does provide an interesting comparison to our distant cousins, chimpanzees. When chimpanzee groups patrol their area, their territory, they of course occasionally run into other chimpanzees, rival groups. Sometimes these groups consist of just young females with their children. When that happens, the attacking group often takes advantage of a relatively defenseless target and eats the young. The benefit of this is that it reduces the numbers of a rival group in a relatively risk-free way, whilst potentially increasing the availability of resources and mates for the attacking group. Could this have been the same at Atapuerca all those years ago? Could roaming groups of prehistoric humans have opportunistically seized the moment to get a meal to reduce the numbers of a rival group? It's certainly possible, and a reasonable explanation for why only the remains of young hominins are found. However, as with most of the things we've discussed today, coming to concrete conclusions is very difficult, if not impossible. It is just one of many possibilities. Atapuerca, though, is a fantastic reminder that hominins, prehistoric humans, ancient humans, may have been similar to us in many, many ways, but they may also have behaved very differently too. And despite all the innovations in technology and the evolution of larger and larger brains that could overcome many difficulties, they probably lived very, very hard, challenging lives. That's kind of a bummer to end on.